I'm Michael Avery, and you're listening to an interview I conducted for Classic Business on ClassicFM 102.7. Now, tonight's retirement feature is brought to you by Century Property Developments, and we continue a long-running theme that we've had on the program, and that's evaluating the complexity and the issue of fees in the industry, which it's certainly getting the kind of attention that perhaps it wasn't getting a few years ago, which is a good thing. And to discuss this, I'm joined by Walter van der Merwe, CEO of FedGroup Life. Afternoon, Walter.
Afternoon, Michael.
Now, you've got over 2 decades experience in this industry, and you've seen the scandals that have forced the rethink of the way things are handled. And we have this review that's currently underway by National Treasury. Give me a bit of a background from your perspective as someone who's kind of straddled both the formal, almost listed space to the more independent space. What do you think is at the heart of the problem here?
Well, there's an interest to make profit in administering retirement funds, which is a company interest, of course, which is justified. But there's also an interest in terms of retirement savings, which is long-term. And often they're in conflict because retirement savings is long-term, as I mentioned, and needs to be structured in such a way to maximize that retirement savings.
And, you know, that really is at the heart of the problem. And my problem is that when we talk about this review being spearheaded by National Treasury, we haven't really, and I've certainly felt that we haven't got to the heart of that problem. How do we, because let's face it, businesses are in business to see a maximum return, and therefore they will be incentivized to have fees that are aligned with that motive. How do we get around that?
I would say a standardization of fees and fee structures that make sense would go a long way to improve the industry. In that way, companies that run efficiently and administer retirement savings efficiently can still make a good profit. And at the same time, those of us that are saving, those of us that need to save, can then have a clear basis of comparing providers and choosing the ones that best suit us.
Would that not create a situation where we see a market that isn't perhaps as competitive as it could be, because people do like to compete based on offering lower fees, for example?
Lower fees are good. It's the structure of those fees that become a problem. Some of them just don't make sense. Having administration fees based on assets just don't make sense, because someone that's saved a little pay less for their administration. A person that saved a lot proportionately pay a lot more. Now, that just doesn't make sense.
You're penalizing people for doing the right thing here, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Now, we're seeing this possible phasing out of provident funds in order to ensure that people are forced to reinvest at least 2/3 of their retirement, because what we've had, and in particular it's prevalent in the union movement, is members coming to retirement age, withdrawing the full capital amount and perhaps splitting that away within a year, and then you kind of you're up the creek without a paddle, aren't you? So what one can understand why that is being driven. However, the unions are going to kick back quite strongly here. Do you foresee enough political will to actually make this legislative change stick?
I think it's going to be a test of the legislation. It makes sense. We all agree you need to take that amount of money that you saved, whether you're pension or provident, to provide yourself with a pension. That's the intention of the money. The state can't be seen to look after us when we get to retirement. We have a responsibility to provide for ourselves in our retirement. So I do think there may be still some compromise, and I hope that both entities can come to an agreement.
And there's a cultural issue at play here, isn't there? And, if we could really start teaching people just to leave a bit of wealth from generation to generation, we can start putting an end to this kind of intergenerational poverty that we see at the very roots of so many of our social ills. And I do feel that there's a great deal more that can be done by all role players. I'm not apportioning blame here, but in terms of educating people about the importance of savings.
Correct. Savings, we all understand that it's needed. We all have expenses, and we need to see retirement savings as one of those necessary expenses. like school fees. We have to pay school fees to educate our children. At the same time, we need to save for our retirement to provide for ourselves when we get there. And I want to come back to the fee structures, because there's no standardization of fees. We've now identified we need to save, but we can't determine how much it's costing us and what we're paying for it. So for me, that's a bigger underlying problem. The structures in terms of pension, provident, union input, government input, that will also be there. But I think we as providers need to take responsibility and be ethical to those retirement savers and put fee structures in place that make sense and are completely transparent.
Well, we are starting to see a huge pushback by the independents. The likes of Steve and Nathan at 10X is another individual who was an investment analyst earning seven figures and is now a bit of a crusader, kind of Rob Rusconi, if you will, and yourself. And it's good to see, because it feels like there's a good critical mass and momentum forcing the industry to think long and hard about self-regulation around fees. So just to give you a parting comment on, we know that fees are very difficult to understand. We also see a great deal of complexity in these products as well.
Correct, which is unnecessary. I mean, if you take the analogy of a bank account, every month you put money into a bank account, there's a cost for that account, for that service. That saving grows monthly. That's it. It's as simple as that. There's no need for the added complexity. It's often done as a sales tool. Often it's a nice story to tell in terms of providing that product, but it's not necessary.
Well, hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much, Walter van der Merwe, CEO of FedGroup Life, with this week's retirement feature, brought to you by Century Property Developments.
Arthritis. The pain in your joints is an alarm signal. It warns us that inflammation is at work. Inflammation is also the leading cause for the destruction of cartilage and joints. Rumalin targets inflammation and helps combat arthritic pain and joint destruction. Rumalin is a new generation product. Contains no steroids or glucosamine. Available without prescription. Rumalin, developed by the Medical Nutritional Institute, mnilifestyle.co.za.
For access to more podcasts, visit www.classicfm.co.za.